Hey everybody, it's Robert coming to you with another adventure into history, and today we are at the amazing old Phillippi Church and the associated cemetery that's just behind me here. Now this place has always been extremely special to me ever since I was a kid. My family actually used to attend this church way back when. This church ceased to function as a church back in the 1970s, but I had ancestors that came out here, and this was also a place that I visited multiple times as a kid with my mom and family when we were chasing genealogy. It's places like this that got me really interested into history and the historic documentation that I do today. So I'm back out here today with Cecil. He is off in the woods, and we are actually here today to look for some additional graves that may not be associated with the cemetery. So this church is very, very old, having been established in 1835. It obviously dates back to pre-Civil War days. And prior to the Civil War, there were people who were enslaved were also brought to this church. And this church had a handful of people who were enslaved that were members of the church back then. As a kid, when I came out here, I distinctly remember my grandmother saying something about there being graves in the woods and referencing the fact that it was probably an old slave cemetery. It's something that I have remembered for all of these years, and always, that even as a kid, that really captured my interest, and as a kid I wanted to go find it. So here I am about 30 years later, and I'm out here with Cecil. We were talking last night and I mentioned that, and he said that he had also heard the same thing, that there may have been a slave cemetery at once associated with this church that has possibly been lost to time. So we're out here today to try to find it, visit the church, and also visit some of my relatives over here in the maintained cemetery. Let's go. So this is the Phillippi Cemetery that exists today, right across from the church. Relatively maintained, I guess. So it looks like someone at least cuts the grass every once in a while, doesn't let it get too terribly grown up. But we're not going to go there just yet. We're actually going to dive into the woods here. And this is a case where I should have been recording already, because Cecil and I have already been out here for a few minutes looking around, and we made a really fascinating discovery already. So Cecil has done some research on the historic aerials, and as far back as the pictures go, it shows farmland basically encircling this church and coming up right to the back of the church. And this area over here was kind of more of the wooded area. This would be the area that would be most likely to have been an additional cemetery. There's only so many woods out here that either have been around long enough for there to have been an old cemetery in them, or haven't been clear cut with pines being planted in them and disturbed like that. So it gives us a limited area to look for where you would actually find that kind of forgotten history somewhat preserved, if you will, or at least where we know it still exists. It was very common for churches in the antebellum era to have two separate cemeteries. One cemetery for the white members and a separate cemetery for people who were enslaved or African American members. So it's not uncommon to have that, especially on a church that's this old. It's just, if it truly exists, and it sounds like it does, actually locating it. You can see what I'm talking about here, where you can see the cemetery and the church down there. We've got a section of woods, but these aren't very old woods here. And then all around has been clear cut and replanted with planted pines. It's part of the logging industry, so we kind of can get an idea that if there was something in these woods back here, it's more than likely either been destroyed or was not there to begin with. And that's why when researching and trying to find maybe a lost cemetery, if you're hoping that it still exists, you look for the old tree growth, the sites that haven't been cut or plowed over, because typically speaking, people would honor these cemeteries and not cut around them. Not in all instances. There's plenty of instances where logging companies have run over and destroyed cemeteries, but there's also been a lot of instances where they have avoided them for the past 100 years. So always looking for those old trees, cedar trees in particular, usually planted in cemeteries, that sort of thing, to kind of give you clues as to where to find sites that may have been lost. So that's a little bit of kind of a catch up on what we're doing in our process here. But jumping back into today, we're looking for this site, and I lost Cecil. I don't know where he went. So I officially have no idea where Cecil is. But I think that this may be an old road bed. I don't know if you can see it well on camera or not. Kind of right there. I think that's an old road bed that runs back here behind the cemetery that we know exists. These woods aren't, I'm not seeing anything in here that's exceptionally old, but it hasn't been cut anytime recently. There were woods 30 years ago right here. And we are down in one of the sand counties of Georgia. And stuff does tend to grow a little bit slower down here. I'm not thinking that this is a road anymore. There was dirt moved right here, we can see, but it doesn't look like a road anymore. It looks, I don't know, maybe some kind of form of terracing or water management. There's an old stump right there. It's a very old stump. We always find ourselves in the woods facing off with briars and vines. Just look at this stump for a minute. It's a old pine stump, so that's the heart. That's the heart pine right there. This thing could be a couple hundred years old. This stuff just does not rot. It's cool to see. That tree could have been cut down when they built the original church here in the 1830s. And that stump still exists. So getting back to a little bit of the history of the church, I actually want to get back and write and film a full history of this church, because it's a very meaningful place to me, as I said at the start of this, both coming here as a kid, but also the family connection. We had ancestors that went here, people who are buried in the cemetery, and there's a lot of history on this church. There are a lot of old church minutes that are available that detail going-ons with the church way back when. The building that exists today, I believe, is late 1800s. I have confirmed kind of that build date in the past, but I don't have my notes with me right now, so I'm not able to say exactly. I do know that the original building was evidently bigger than what is here now, and after the Civil War it was rebuilt into the smaller structure that it is today. After the Civil War, the African American community moved to a separate church, and this one existed until the 1970s when it went defunct. There's another big old stump right here. I think that one is actually cedar. Oh, that's cedar. I thought that was fieldstone for a minute there. Yeah, that's an old cedar stump right there. There's, again, no telling how old that is. We got some old fence wire right there. Now, is that? It's not barbed wire. It's probably an old cemetery fence wire. They've obviously put a chain link fence around the cemetery at some time, so that could have been around the cemetery before they put the chain link fence in there. But cedar tree right there, dead cedar tree right there too. Just a couple interesting things to note in the landscape here, but we have an incredible find coming up right over here. Now, we've already located this. We located this before I started filming, and this right here alone validates my memory. And my grandmother said that there were graves in the woods, and said that there was possibly an old slave cemetery out here. This validates what Cecil heard, that there may have been a slave cemetery connected with this church. Because look at this right here. This is an absolutely amazing find. Just look at that. Do you know what this is and why this is so special? I'll tell you, this is an old wooden headstone. I guess we can't really call it a headstone, but this is an old wooden marker for a grave. And this could be, this could easily be a couple hundred years old. And you ask, how does this still exist in the woods like this, being so old? And I've seen these before. I've seen these old wooden grave markers in other cemeteries that still exist. And I can't give you the exact reasoning behind it, but it always seems down in these sand counties that these old wooden headstones exist for longer. I don't know if it's just drier down here. It always feels drier in these counties. Or if because of the sandy soil, it just does not hold water and water filters away. But that is exactly what this is, an old wooden grave marker. Another reason that it's still here is, remember we talked about the heart pine of the stump earlier? This is heart pine right here. This is the heart, whereas the outside of the wood has rotted away. That's why you can see the grains in it, when it's textured like that. The outside of the wood is rotted away, leaving just the heart right here. And this is really solid wood that, pretty much when it gets to this point, it won't rot. It's also what people call fat lighter. It's got all those resins in it. The wood is really hard. It's not prone to rot or termites. So it just exists. And that is what that is. Now, if we needed to confirm that that is a headstone, because I wanted to do that before I showed it and stated without a doubt that this is a headstone, there's a couple things that we can look at, other than it very much looks like an old wooden headstone by itself. But one thing that we can look at is the way that the grave is positioned, if this is a headstone. So we know that it's running either this way, probably this way, or running that way. So we go over here and look at the graves in the cemetery that we can confirm, and we note the graves are running in the same direction. You see the headstones faced in the exact same direction. They're actually facing that way. We can confirm that this one over here, this old wooden headstone, facing the same way, grave running in the same direction. There it is, over here. So this right here 100% validates the thing that I remember as a kid, my grandmother saying that there were graves in the woods. What Cecil heard, that there's an old slave cemetery associated with this place. So what is probably is, after looking at those graves over here, is the burial is running. This is the head, and the grave runs this way. The front of the grave marker would face that way. The front of the grave marker faces the east. Yeah, I believe it's the east that the face of the grave marker, the head of the grave, would face.
You'll need to unlock your iPhone first.
I don't know what that was, but that was hearing a random voice out in the woods in a cemetery always gives you the chills real quick. Even if it's just your phone. Whew, my heart stopped pounding there for a minute. Anyway, so this would have been the face of the headstone. So if there was anything ever engraved on it, it would have been on this side. Of course, you can see again the face is rotted off. The outside layers of the wood have rotted off, leaving only the heart there. So anything that ever may have been written on it or engraved on it is long, long gone. But that is an amazing find right there. There's a nail right here. A little bit of a nail left right there. And this is not old fencing either. If it was old fencing, for one, it wouldn't be this shape, and we would see more remnants of a fence running through here. But this is not a fence post. Oh, look, look at that right there. There's some more phenomenal evidence for us to look at right here. I don't know how well you'll be able to see it on camera, but that is a very, very old small nail right there. A single nail in this. That's a square nail that looks blacksmith made from what I'm seeing. Yeah, that's a very tiny, looks like blacksmith made square nail right there. That is old. That is old, folks. This is an incredible find right here alone. You know, the importance of finding a single wooden headstone in the woods validates what I remember, validates what we've heard. Probably cannot say for certain, but probably the burial of somebody who was enslaved. I cannot say for certain. Again, you know, we don't know who this is. All we have is a wooden headstone, though. But I do not question for a minute that this is a burial. It's amazing. This, honestly, I cannot really express. I'm a little bit without words right now because I can't express how incredible that is to find out here. This old cemetery. So I don't know where Cecil is. He's I don't know. He's looking somewhere, I reckon, or lost, or kidnapped maybe. I don't know. Anyway, I've canvassed this whole area. I've seen nothing else that looks like a grave. The other thing that's working against us is we're again in these sandy counties, and down in these sandy counties like this, in the indentions that we see up in like Talbot County, Harris County, with the more of the red clay soil or the black dirt soil, the indentions don't form down in these sandy counties. I don't know why that is. I guess it's just the composition of the sand and the soil. However it works, they don't form like we see them in other counties. So it makes looking for graves that are just indentions exceptionally hard. Also, another thing to make is that rock out here is not as prevalent as it is up in Harris County, Talbot County. So again, we don't get those field stones that are so very common up there down here as often. So that leaves them with what was the option for them to use instead of field stones, but a piece of wood. And a piece of wood that has, I mean, looking at that, the square nail, knowing the history, that piece of wood is probably near 200 years old. And it has survived this long. It will not always survive. You know, again, we've talked about the heartwood, this kind of rot resistant, this termite resistant. Nothing will last forever. That will not always be here. Documenting it, recording this, the existence of this is so important, and it just means, oh man, it just means so much to me. So it is planted into the ground intentionally. It's not just, you know, something that was accidentally placed here, set against this tree. This tree is younger than this. It is something that is intentionally planted into the ground. We can see that sandy soil right there. I'm going to kind of cover that back up though. Incredible, incredible. It's not laid flat. No doubt that that's what this is. So we are more than likely standing in the midst of an additional cemetery out here. Probably a burial ground for people who were enslaved. Again, I go back to that's what I heard as a kid. That's what Cecil has heard. We don't never know for sure with a completely unmarked burial like this, but incredible, incredible. And you know, to talk about again something that I mentioned on a video the other day. That was a person who was living and breathing and just like we are today. And it's so hard to believe that you know, they are for the most part lost to time, except for this wooden headstone. But these are the untold stories buried right here. So I'm back out here by the church. We are going to take a look at that on this video, but beforehand I want to go into the cemetery here. I've also found Cecil. And so we're in the old Phillippi Cemetery here, the well-marked one. And we're gonna go see if we can't find my third great grandmother and fourth great grandparents' grave out here. Old concrete grave right there. So these are, I was talking about field stones earlier. This is the type of rock that we find down here in these sand counties. It's got a high iron content, I think it is, that gives it that particular look. Very different than the field stone that we find out in the other counties. We've got another wooden headstone over here. Or another, I wonder if this might have been a, well, it's cut, it's angled at the top, it's rounded at the top, rather. I saw a couple other pieces of wood there. I wondered if it might be a, like the remains of a grave house. But looks like it was cut right there. This old wood just lasts down here. Just, I don't know what that is, but that one's planted for sure. Rounded top. Looks like it was cut that way. This is the Chapman family here. All right, so this right here is the grave of my third great grandmother, Lily Jordan Green. It says wife of William Chapman. She was born 1867 and she died 1906. Now she was first married to John Thomas Green, who's buried in Andersonville. I believe we actually went and visited his grave recently. Their son was George Monroe Green, who was married to Etta Mae Joyner, who was the daughter of my great-grandfather, Shady Joyner. And her parents are actually buried over here. So these are going to be my fourth, so make sure I get that right, fourth great grandparents. Philip Jordan, 1828 to 1884. And Missouri Purdue, wife of Philip Jordan, 1832 to 1881. Now, if we notice something here, these are modern markers that are placed on these graves, modern granite markers. So they were originally either in unmarked graves or had, field stones, maybe wooden markers that were replaced at some point by a relative. But those are very good markers that will really stand the test of time. Actually, if you look out here, there's several graves that are out here that are replaced with modern markers. Like these two, the 1865, 1885, the Woodalls here. That's a definite modern marker. It's a broken field stone. So it'd be interesting to know if these markers were replaced or if these were just originally unmarked graves. Probably originally just unmarked graves. But those are my three people that are here. So I'm only connected to this William Chapman through marriage. He would have been my, four-time step grandfather. And it looks like these Chapmans are related to this Woodall family. See Sarah Woodall, another wife of William Chapman. She died 1893. So that after her death is when he must have married Lily Jordan Green. So Josie Chapman, daughter of William and Lily Chapman, right there. So Lily Jordan, if I'm not entirely sure all of the all of the relations here at this point in time, but these would actually be half relatives then through Lily Chapman, if that's Lily Jordan Green Chapman that's referencing. But this is all around an amazing cemetery that deserves a further look in the future. We came out here today to try to locate the unknown graves that may be in those woods. I think we've confirmed one. Incredible cemetery here, deserves a closer look. Also visit my relatives out here. But before we go, I want to take a quick look at the Phillippi Church. And as I was saying earlier on the video, I want to come back out here and do a better video on the history of this church. I'm not prepared to do that today, but this church means a lot to me. I'm always worried that it's not going to be here the next time I come down here, but Cecil and I were talking earlier and talking about what great condition this structure is, and really it should be saved. And it's at a point now where it could be saved. Cecil, you said you were in here in the rain yesterday, and what, like one leak?
Yeah, one spot leaks.
Yeah, that old tin roof is holding up well. I wish I'd been out here in the rain. It's probably a heck of an experience to stand in that when it's pouring rain, right? Yeah.
It's pretty loud in there.
I bet. So this is the actual church building that my ancestors would have gone into and attended. I want to say that there are some other ancestors of mine that may have gone to church here in more modern times that are not buried here. This is an old primitive Baptist church. You can see some of the siding has been removed from the top. I'm going to guess maybe not legally. When I was a kid here, the pulpit still remained in this church. The pews were gone, but it was otherwise pretty much in the same condition that we see it today. I believe that I've got an old photo of this church that shows it from the outside, either shortly after abandonment or while it was still being used. Oh, there's the one leak. There's the one leak right there. Right there. The pulpit used to be here. Someone has removed it. And obviously we've had people coming in here and putting graffiti and stuff on the walls, but overall this structure is in amazing shape. As far as old abandoned churches go, this is one of the ones that's in the best condition. I think I said earlier that this building dates to the late 1800s. It's definitely post-Civil War. They rebuilt this church. The description of the earlier church really describes it as I think it's a bigger building. That I want to say, and I could be mistaken, but I want to say that there may have been an attached school or another structure that was built separately for people who were enslaved to worship in there. And it may have been an overall bigger, I think it was an overall bigger building, and then it was reduced in size into just this church. It was either two buildings or an overall building, bigger building, and then was reduced in size to the church that we see today. I remember the old can lids plugging holes in it. I remember seeing those when I was a kid. Got a little bit of termites getting in here, but not. That beam has a little bit, but that one is not. That's still solid. I'm gonna guess somebody probably stole the windows out of here, because that picture of this church is in the history book that you got me, right?
Yeah.
And it shows it with all the windows and doors.
Well, I think they're busted. There's glass under all of them.
Gotcha.
Outside.
Yeah, yep. There's the old window frame, the glass right there. Now, when I was a kid, there used to be honeybees in this church. And that was back here. There are honeybees living in the back of this church. You walked out to the back of this church and there were bees just all buzzing around. And someone cut out the side of the church and got the honey out of it, removed the bees. But you can see the evidence still in there where they used to be here. I'll take a look underneath.
Yeah, look at the seal beam on it.
All right. Oh, wow. Oh, that's old. Yeah, so this is going to be from the original, one of the original buildings here. You see, this is an old beam right here that was notched out, probably for the joist. Look at that. That is an old piece of wood right there on both sides. So they reused that from the original build, reused it on this structure. And then these beams that are going across are more modern, probably sawmilled wood. At some point, someone took some efforts to stabilize this building. Look at that, sitting on that piece of wood.
This is probably from the original building.
Yeah, that's
It's
what
got
I think.
the notches cut in it.
Yeah. And it looks like it extends, oh no, I guess not quite the entire length.
Yeah, it goes all the way to the other side.
Does it? Okay, cool.
It's on these sides too.
That's an old tree. It's in the original longleaf pine that was growing here in Georgia when the settlers came here and cut it down for this church. Used an adze to square it. You can see the marks in it. That's cool. The old outhouse is out there. And Cecil found it earlier, somewhere in those woods. I've seen it before. Not going to revisit it again. See more broken glass from the windows that used to be here. Check out that big fieldstone right there. And there's another look at this side beam right there. And we see this is built out of round nails on the side of this church. So, and I want to say that this could have been repair work too done over the years, but I want to say that this building is late 1800s, maybe 1880s. I know exactly when this building was built. I found those records before, I just do not remember right now. But very impressive structure here. Still got a good tin roof on it. If it had a shingle roof, it would have been gone by now. See the old wood burning stove chimney sticking out through the top. Lovely old building. Now here's where they used to have the dinner on the grounds. This was in better shape when I was a kid. But it's time's getting to it. There's where they'd have the old dinner on the grounds out here at the church. It's really interesting too to read the history, the old minutes of this church. They would excommunicate people for various reasons, bring them up on trial. This church was also used as kind of a meeting house for the community. Remember one in the old minutes, and these minutes go back to the 1830s to maybe late 1800s, or maybe it goes up to the 70s. I don't exactly remember, but I remember minutes from the 1800s talk about somebody that was excommunicated from this church because they went to a Masonic lodge. And I thought that was really interesting. But just look at that building right there. Again, I'm kind of without words looking at all this stuff. It's so meaningful to me. Just cannot express it. And I would hope that this building remains through my entire lifetime, at least. I'd want it preserved forever. It means a whole lot to me. And if there's any ways that I was ever able to help do that, I certainly would. So I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I hope to come back here and give a better history on this church. Cemetery as well. Maybe find some more connections out there. Thanks, Cecil, for joining me out here today. I hear that he's got a sketch of this church coming up soon, so y'all be sure to look out on the community post and Facebook for some of Cecil's artwork that we'll have upcoming. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on another adventure into history.